Thank you all for coming to the Title and Total Comp Project update as far as our forums. I'm Mark Walters. I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer for the Office of Human Resources. This forum is the next part of our series of forums to talk about the project as far as where we're going and provide you all the information and keep the campus informed as far as all the activities. How many folks were at the last forum that we had in the spring? All right. Looks like quite a few folks. All right, so we are videoing this forum today, so we can put this out on our website for others to look at in the future. So we're going to hold on the questions until the end of the discussions as far as the presentations. And so if you have questions, we'll wait till the end for those. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about standard job descriptions and titles versus position descriptions. We'll talk a great deal about that. We also are going to talk about the compensation and how it's determined with the new compensation structure, benefits update, as well as learning opportunities for all of you and outreach going forward. And then at the end will be the wrap-up as far as the questions. So all of you at your seats should have a survey that we'd like you to fill out when this forum is completed, as well as an index card. If you have any questions that you don't necessarily feel comfortable raising to the group or we run out of time, please put those on the index cards, and then we will pull those together, and that continues to inform our FAQs that we have on our website, as well as other information that we've developed for the project. And so with that, I just wanted to put forward some statements as far as why we're doing this project. And those of you that came to the forums in the spring heard me talk about this, but I always want to reiterate as far as how we're moving forward. We're really trying to be a model employer as far as with this project, as far as facilitating the achievement for uw-Madison's mission and vision to reflect its values, and certainly having a compensation entitling structure that's market informed and competitive as far as pay and benefits certainly is a way to attract and retain employees. And so this is definitely part of our strategy for being a model employer. Also, we want to make sure that we have thoughtful design of our policies and procedures to support this new compensation program as we go forward. So this is something that came out of the HR design strategic plan as far as being a model employer. That also is on our website to look at as far as the plan we put together a couple of years back. We've accomplished a lot through that HR design strategic plan, but this is one of those big areas that we identified as far as tackling with that plan, and we're now getting to the point of moving towards implementation, and as you'll hear in a bit, as far as in the spring of 2020. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shana Ullsvik.
So for the Title and Total Compensation Project, there are three main objectives. One, to create clear, consistent, and relevant job titles and descriptions, to produce market-based pay and benefit structures, or what we call total compensation and benefits, so we can reward and retain our excellent employees, as well as producing a framework for career development. So this project has many different components and different project partners. As you can see here, it's not just uw-Madison, it's all of UW system as well, Huron Consulting, and Mercer Consulting. So for the TTC project impact, we're really focusing on, again, total compensation, which is compensation and benefits. But those two elements are part of what are usually or typically referred to as total rewards. So here you can see other four components that are different pieces and programs that HR professionals try to provide and an organization tries to provide to employees to really recognize and reward performance. So you see performance, recognition, work life, and career development as well. So again, we're focusing on two elements, but since they all work together to attract, retain, motivate employees, there will be a little bit of varying degrees of impact to other areas as well. So a couple of reminders before we go further into this presentation, because there's a lot of talk out on campus and misconceptions. One is that people will not lose their jobs as a result of this project. Okay? No one will lose any part of their pay, jobs will not change, and you won't have to reapply for your job. But also, more importantly, there won't be any immediate pay increases as part of this project. And that's something that we'd like to strongly emphasize. So we're looking, and we'll go into a timeline of actually implementing this title and salary structure in March 1st, 2020. But that doesn't mean people that might fall under the minimum of the new salary range, that they would automatically get an increase. That aspect, that component, we need to put numbers on. Leadership needs to provide and approve their input and give recommendations for how to really attack that type of problem, right? Do we do it in 1 step, 2 step, over a year, 2 years? All those discussions need to take place. So this is the project timeline. I'll go over it very briefly. Obviously, you see a lot of concurrent rectangles going around, and I know it's small print, but it just shows you exactly all the different components of this project. We have compensation, we have benefits, we have IT impact, we have what we call cutover. Do we need to freeze some systems to allow for the new program to really take place in all our IT software and programs? All those things are being discussed. Also policies, procedures, what's also impacted due to changes in compensation and benefits. Again, for title and salary structure, we're looking at a 3/1/2020 implementation date. So some other things that you didn't see on the timeline, progress to date. We created the job framework, so we have 24 job groups and 116 subgroups. We create draft standard job descriptions that describe jobs as they exist on campus, both here in Madison as well as system. We engaged hundreds of subject matter experts. I think the number right now is 552 across campus and system to really provide input on those job descriptions. How do jobs exist on campus? Are we capturing them within the words and the word choices correctly? Also, we completed the review of those job descriptions to make sure, again, that we're getting things right. We completed what we call a competitive assessment, and that was done by Mercer Consulting. It's where they looked at what we provide in terms of salary and total cash compensation versus our peers or those other organizations where we compete for talent. How are we doing? Are we stacking up correctly? Where do we need improvement? And of course, we drafted and actually finalized, since creating this slide, our compensation philosophy, which was blessed by leadership. And we completed the Employee Benefit Preference Survey. So that was a survey that came out last winter where we asked employees, if you had choices like pet care versus tuition reimbursement, what do you value? So just raise of hands, who actually completed or participated in the survey, yeah. All right, so you know the questions that were asked and you know the importance of it. All the results of that, as well as kind of a market analysis version for our benefits program, will be combined. So again, compared to our peers, where are we lacking? Marry that with the benefit preference survey. What do our employees want? So if the BVA said something like, well, we really should do some improvement on work-life balance, and the benefit preference survey said, people really want flex schedules, that's something that would really pop up, and that's something that we'd want to recommend to leadership. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Brian Steen.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Great. Okay, so I get to talk to you a little bit about standard job descriptions today. So Shana highlighted some of the things that we have accomplished so far in this project. One of those big wins to date is the development of our standard job descriptions. And we're going to just share a little bit today about what those are and how they influence what will eventually become your individual position description, and how we then take that standard job description to market. So as we think about standard job descriptions, I also like to use the term job profile as I talk about it, so you may hear me say that as I'm speaking. But essentially, the standard job description will serve two primary purposes. One of those is that it will allow us to regularly go out to market and sort of get a pulse check on what's happening. If we think about some of our current titles and the way we've described some of our work in current state, a title like Admin Program Specialist, as you can imagine, is really hard to take to market and understand whether or not we're competitive. So we are trying to get to a structure that will allow for titling that is market influenced and describing our work in a way that will better capture what's happening out in the market. As Shana mentioned, this doesn't change what you do in your everyday, but it's just changed. The only thing that changes really is how we profile that work. The standard job description will also influence your individual position description, which Meghan will be up to talk to you about in a little while. So the standard job description is what we would consider to be one-to-many. There would be a standard job description if we use an example of, let's say, a custodian. There may be hundreds of employees at UW-Madison and across our system that would be tied to the standard job description of custodian. But there's also will be individual position descriptions that would describe how employee A, Brian, as a custodian, carries out the everyday responsibilities of that custodian standard job description or profile. The position description is unique. It's tied to an individual. The standard job description describes the work, and it's a one-to-many relationship. Your standard job descriptions, for those of you that have not been to our other forums to get or had the opportunity to attend those, your standard job description is going to include some common elements. One of those, or the first being the job title and then your job group and subgroup. The job title really is supposed to be market informed and influenced. The way we try to describe this is if you were to think today about Googling a job that's similar to yours, what would be the title that you would use to look for it? Again, if I use admin program specialist as the example, if you did a Google search for admin program specialist jobs, there's no telling what that would return or what type of results that would yield. But if we think about that in terms of a specific title like accountant, I can go and find an accountant title and probably have a common understanding of the activities that are performed in an accountant job. The standard job description will also include the job group and the subgroup. And this essentially is just a way that we categorize titles that are similar or in a similar, carry out a similar function for the university. So if we think about human resources as an example, human resources is a job group. And within that job group, we have subgroups that help us further describe the type of work that's carried out. So if we think about generalized human resources work versus specialized human resources work, you would see job groups and subgroups that would reflect that. As Shana mentioned, UW has 24 job groups in our current structure, and those span across the functions that are carried out at the university. And those, a complete listing of those is available on the TTC website, which we will display toward the end of this presentation if you're interested in going and exploring what type of job groups we've established. Your standard job description will also include a job summary. So the job summary is typically 1 to 2 sentences. It's a very brief statement about the essence of the work that's being performed or the responsibilities of that specific job. And then that summary is what we would consider to be a thumbnail that we would look to market to match against. Your standard job description will also include typical responsibilities. Most standard job descriptions will list about 4 to 8 responsibilities. And again, these are shared across everyone who is in that standard job description with the understanding that your specific position description may very well introduce a unique responsibility that not everyone in the title is responsible to carry out. An example we like to use would be that of a custodian. So if a custodian's responsibility is to maintain cleanliness, that would be listed in the standard job description. How that's done in the everyday would come to life in the position description. And again, Meghan will cover that with you in just a little while. So the standard job descriptions, sort of why they were created, the first and one of the biggest things here is that it helps us to really define the list of responsibilities that are shared across different positions within UW. And again, the important piece of that is we have to have a standardized way to go out and sort of get a pulse check on market and understand what market is doing and how it's paying specific jobs. Without standard job descriptions or these job profiles, it makes that task pretty hard to accomplish. So the standard job descriptions have really served in that purpose. These standard job descriptions, again, Shana sort of mentioned this or highlighted this earlier, but over 550 UW employees were participated in this process to get us to our current library of standard job descriptions. First, we had Campus SMEs draft the initial versions of the standard job descriptions, and then that went through a very lengthy, involved process that was very collaborative, where we were reviewing standard job descriptions. We asked Campus SMEs at Madison and all of Comprehensive to provide feedback, let us know what was missing, what needed to be added, what wasn't necessary to be listed in a standard job description. And from that, we have created a library of 650 plus standard job descriptions that will be a part of our comprehensive library. Those standard job descriptions, again, will then be used for two primary purposes. One, to match to market, and then 2, to build your individual position description. So with that and with position descriptions in mind, I'm going to turn it to Meghan Owens from C&T, and she's going to talk to us about position descriptions.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Can everyone hear me? Wonderful. Thank you. Clicker. Thank you. Okay. I remember how to work this thing. All right. Wonderful. So as Brian was chatting to you about standard job descriptions, and now I'm going to talk to you a bit about position descriptions. Throughout some of these presentations, if you've been to our presentations before, we've talked about creating standard job descriptions, but also making sure that we're still able to capture unique responsibilities in your job descriptions, because we do recognize that positions on campus, while may have very similar components, also have unique components in each position, and we want to make sure that those are captured. So this section will cover the area of position descriptions. So there's my green arrow. So position descriptions are different, as Brian talked about, from standard job descriptions. Standard job descriptions are a template, would you say, for our current jobs on campus. Position descriptions are what are unique to your position. Okay? So I'm going to talk about what components go into your unique position description. So a PD consists of the template of the standard job description. So you see up there, there's the template that Brian chatted about with the job information, the job summary, and the typical responsibilities. Additional components include unique responsibilities. Again, what Brian talked about. So Brian talked these unique responsibilities, which will consist of about 2 to 4 key responsibilities that are unique to a job description. So to go back to Brian's example of the custodian example, where a typical responsibility might be maintain cleanliness, a unique responsibility might be remove hazardous materials, right? That is a unique responsibility to some custodians, but not to all. Therefore, that would be included in the unique responsibilities. It's, like you said, 2 to 4 key responsibilities and about 0 to 20% of the total job, okay? You might not have any unique responsibilities, and that is completely fine, okay? So if the typical responsibilities in the standard job description adequately describe the responsibilities in your job, you're done. No need to go any further, and that's completely fine, okay? Next, education. So in the other elements, this is where there will be an education component. Minimum preferred education will be listed in the standard job description. Managers and supervisors can further specify in the position description if additional or other educational education is necessary. Not required if it's necessary upon recruitment. So when we go out to recruitment, people can look and say, hey, we need to have this level or this. Okay? All right. Optional elements that managers and supervisors can specify: certifications and licensures. Some position descriptions will require certain certifications and licensures, others will not. So we want to be able to capture those. Working conditions and physical requirements. That's been a big kind of thing that we'd really like to get standardized on campus, especially for recruitment purposes. So we will have some more standardized working conditions and physical requirements included in our position descriptions that managers and supervisors can select from. We also will have a tasks area. So if it's necessary to include tasks in position description, those can be added as well. Okay. So how will this be done? So we've talked about this, we talked about it, you've heard a lot about it. I think you are all pretty well educated on standard job descriptions and position descriptions. Now we've got to figure out how we get you a position description, right? So standard job descriptions, the process will start with taking an initial match of the standard job description to each employee. So OHR is going to do an initial match, and then your divisional HR office is going to confirm that match. We expect those to be changed. Obviously, OHR, we will do it if there's an easy match for us to make, that's great. But for example, the one-to-many titles that we currently have, administrative program specialist is a great example of one that we have a lot of people doing different roles on campus right now using that title. Those titles will need to be evaluated at the divisional level to find the correct standard job description to correspond. Okay. From there, it will go to the manager who will build the position description and also confirm that what divisional HR has done is correct. Okay. So your managers and supervisors will then build the position description. At that point, the manager and supervisor will sit down with the employee and say, let's talk about what we've decided, what's come up with. What's your opinion? How are things looking? Did we capture things correctly? Is this an adequate reflection? So there's the process. When is this all going to happen? We expect employees can participate in reviewing their new position descriptions with their managers in the winter of 2019-2020. That is our timeline. And, Shana showed you the timeline earlier in the presentation, and that's in that timeline. So that is when we're expecting employees to have these conversations. Employees will then confirm that their new PDs accurately describe their responsibilities. And then in our office, the Office of Human Resources, in partnership with Divisional HR, we'll provide managers information, tools, and resources in preparation for the PD review with employees. We recognize that this is a new thing for managers and supervisors, okay? So we all need to get educated on what kind of language we're talking. You know, words might mean the same thing that they used to mean before. So we want to make sure we're all talking the same language and we're all having conversations so that when you talk to your coworker, you're like, oh yeah, that's what this meant. Yep, we understand each other, we're on the same page. So OHR is going to be helping educating our managers and supervisors so that we're all having informed conversations. So I get the next section too. So how is compensation going to be determined? So this is we're doing all of this work with standard job descriptions and then position descriptions. How does it all relate back to compensation? Okay. So your position description, as we said, is tied to a standard job description. So we're going backwards. We're going to read this slide from right to left. The standard job description is then used to find a match with job description in the market. So Brian talked about Googling your job description, your job title. Like if you went into Google and said, hey, I want to see what other people like me are doing, what would you put in there? We're kind of hoping that the standard job description title is that Google title. Because most likely, that's the market title. That's the title that everybody else is using. So if we're looking for other people like you to compare you salary-wise, we can have that job title. We will all be looking at that same job title. So, oh, I did it. Okay. So, oh, excuse me. There. So, job market compensation then, once we've done done that search, and granted we're not Googling, by the way, just so I can be clear. Just to be clear, that's not what we're doing. We're actually there are surveys out there that we will be using that are done by professional organizations to collect market data that we then pay for, and then we receive that information. So it's private third-party information that we are using to collect market data information. So job market compensation is then market inspired, which then informs our standard job description compensation, which then informs your compensation. So we start with it's a train that goes forward and then it comes back. Okay. So I am now turning it over to Diane, who will talk to us about benefits updates.
Thank you, Megan.
Yep.
Can everyone hear me? It's showing that my battery's dead, so if it goes out, raise your hand and I will go to the mic here. As mentioned earlier, benefits is that second facet of the overall compensation program. So we're going to talk a little bit about our UW employee benefits and where we're at with that. So we used a two-pronged approach. The first one is the BVA, or the Benefits Valuation Analysis. What that is where we had Mercer conduct a survey to compare the UW benefit offerings to our peer institutions. How do we stack up? Are our benefits better than theirs? Are they not as good as theirs? Are we competitive? Where are we at with UW benefit offerings? So that's the BVA, or the Benefits Valuation Analysis. The second stool is the Benefits Preferences Survey, which we saw a lot of hands raised earlier of those that participated, so thank you for doing that. Our goal with the Preferences Survey was to find out what all of you value as far as benefit offerings here at UW for yourselves and your families. And we had a great response rate of 47% system-wide, 54% for Madison, so that's really a great rate. Now what are we going to do with that? We have a team of benefits experts who will be looking through all of the compiled data from both the BVA and the Benefits Preferences Survey and making recommendations. So we'll create some options of some benefit enhancement choices and make recommendations to leadership. We will also be developing a long-term benefit strategy, so you can't do everything all at once, but we're trying to put a strategy for a number of years in place of benefit enhancements that we can go ahead and provide to our UW employees based on preferences survey results. So that's where we're at with that. Which benefits are under consideration? Well, it'll be supplemental type benefits, so some paid time off might be one. Flexible work schedule would be another one. Tuition assistance, tuition reimbursement, any types of non-statutory benefits. So perhaps parental leave, maybe some things like short-term disabilities, things that people have asked for like that. Those things are all under consideration as far as benefit enhancements. The things that are not under consideration would be our statutory benefits. Those benefits that are really driven by ETF and the Group Insurance Board and the legislature, such as our retirement, our WRS, health insurance, dental insurance, all of those types of things, really are not on the table for changes at this point in time. So where are we at with our benefits review? As you can see by the check marks, we've done the BBA and we've done the benefits preferences survey, and we have received the compiled results back from Mercer on both of those. Now what we are in process of doing is we're taking that team of benefits experts and we are evaluating all of those results to come up with the options and the recommendations. And all of that will be done by the end of the year. So there's the timeline on when we will be ready to present options and recommendations to leadership. So let's delve down into each one of those two things individually. BBA first. We talked about Mercer conducting the analysis against our peer institutions. And you're probably wondering, who are those peer institutions? Here they are. We had 5 different groupings of organizations that we measured our benefits against. On the left-hand side, you'll see our university peer groups. The first one was large public universities, like all of our Big Ten partners, like UCLA, Texas, Berkeley, University of Washington, and just a whole host of others. Our second group was public and private institutions, like Marquette and SUNY, University of Missouri, University of North Carolina, and a number of others. And our third university peer group was large private universities, like Boston, Cornell, Harvard, Stanford, Syracuse, and a whole lot of others. Then on the right side of your screen, you're going to see Wisconsin peer groups. We wanted to measure against the private sector as well as municipalities. So City of Madison, Madison Metropolitan School District, TDS, CUNA Mutual, SSM Health, a number of them were in that group. City of Racine, City of Stevens Point. So across the state, we were able to measure against a lot of the municipalities and private sector employers. And then the second one in the Wisconsin-based would be Milwaukee-based organizations that stretch amongst the state with a lot of employees and workers throughout the state of Wisconsin. Kohl's, Land's End, Northwestern Mutual, and some others as well. So those are the peer groups that we measured our UW benefit offerings against to see how we stack up. And so what did we find on that BBA? Well, if you look on the left-hand side at the university peer group comparisons, you'll see that on average, UW leads our university peers by 2 to 4%. Now, that's measured on the 3 things you see below, which are retirement, state group health, and time off, paid time off. And they're all different, and the average is 2 to 4%, but if you look closely, in retirement, we're actually 3 to 16% below the median compared to our university peers. Health insurance, we're up to 20% better than all of our university peers, despite the fact that a number of years ago, Act 10 put in place for us things like copays, deductibles, co-insurance, all of those extra expenses that we're all incurring. We're still 20% above our university peer set. And time lost, we're actually 5% below the median. So what Mercer did is they averaged all of that to say 2 to 4%, but really you need to look individually to see where we're at on each of those benefit streams. On the Wisconsin peer group, we're 5 to 29% ahead. Looking individually at those 3 things, and retirement, we're about 1% above. our Wisconsin private sector and municipality groups. Health insurance, we're 9 to 62% above, so we're hugely above on the health insurance. And on the time loss, we're actually a little bit, 4 to 18%, above the median from the Wisconsin peer group. So those are our findings on the BVA. Benefits Preferences Survey, here are the findings on that. And I just took a few and categorized them for you. We had a lot of graphs and a lot of raw data. But what was most valued when all of you decided to take the job at UW, what talked you into it was type of work and the healthcare benefits. Those were the most important things to you for your decision to join UW. Once you had been here for a while, the top 6 things in order are listed there that everybody thought were important or they valued. Pay is number 1. Healthcare insurance and benefits number 2. Retirement is number 3. Your paid time off is number 4. Job security number 5, and flexibility is number 6. And that was across the board at all institutions, not just UW-Madison, across all age groups, across all salary groups. So it's pretty much the case for everybody is pay number 1, healthcare number 2, and WRS number 3. A key point is the importance of pay, which was number 1 everywhere, declines with age. That makes sense. And the importance of healthcare and retirement increase with age. So not too surprising of results on some of that. One thing we heard loud and clear, the banking of the sick leave and our ICI benefit. People really like, they appreciate it, and they want to keep that. That's something that really came out loud and clear, that banking of sick leave so that you can convert at retirement is very important. More than a third of our employees describe their financial situation as stressful, and they think they have not done enough to prepare for retirement. So that gives us an opportunity to get some retirement education out there, some retirement counseling and training. Overall satisfaction with benefits was very high. The big concerns were in the area of pay, the healthcare costs, meaning the co-pays, deductibles, and co-insurances, and parking. So parking costs, parking access, people had a lot of concerns about those things. So we asked for comments in this survey, as many of you remember, and we got 13,672 of them. Lots of comments, so we read through all of them. That was great. I appreciate all the comments. Some were this long, and some were just a sentence or two. But the things came out loud and clear, as they did in the regular portion of the survey. Pay is number 1, healthcare benefits number 2, and kind of a smattering of others that all scored pretty equally. Things like people like the dental insurance, people like the ICI, vision insurance, some of those things came in all together kind of like a tie in the 3rd place. But pay and healthcare, again, were the ones. The one thing I will say about all those 13,672 comments, very positive. People are very appreciative for the most part about the benefits offerings at UW, and we also got a lot of really good ideas on what people want. So that was great. I am putting together a benefits summary that will be posted on our website soon, probably within a month. And what it's going to be is just kind of a snapshot for all of you who don't look through a gazillion charts, but it'll be a snapshot of all the different benefit data and what we found by that. So I'll have that out there in about a month or so or less, along with a couple of the different charts that may be of interest to you, some demographic information on who took the survey and some of the different rankings of all the different benefits that were asked about. So coming soon to TTC website. I will now turn it over to talk about outreach to Teen and O.
All right, hello everyone. I'm the learning specialist. Is there feedback? Okay, instructional designer for the TTC project. So I'll be spending some time to talk to you about learning opportunities and outreach for the TTC. So learning opportunities we have, and we're in the process of developing, and I already have one of these modules available online. The first one we have available is a task versus responsibility microlearning. So it takes about 5 minutes to go through the learning to kind of tell you what the difference is between task versus responsibility. Which if you remember back to, I think was it Meghan who talked about position descriptions, and then we talked about standard job descriptions. So one of the key differences between those two things is, actually not those two things, between our old position descriptions that we previously had is very much focused on tasks, right? Really specific, detailed tasks that we have. With the new standard job description and the position description, it's a lot more focused on responsibilities. So this micro-learning goes through how do you differentiate between what's a task versus what's a responsibility. So only about 5 minutes, and we're planning to do a lot more of these kind of short micro-learnings to cover key concepts. So you can kind of learn about the concepts of TTC, these foundational concepts, as you kind of, as we're nearing the kind of the rollout of this project. So the next micro-learning we're working on is position description versus standard job descriptions. Kind of similar thing to what you heard a little bit earlier this morning. In addition to that, we have trainings coming up for the HR communities across campus and also for the managers and supervisors across campus. So for the HR professionals, we have training in August, that's kind of part 1, and then part 2 will come in October. And once the HR community has been trained and gone through all the TTC training, then we're also holding training for managers and supervisors so that they're able to kind of speak comfortably with their employees about their PDs and things like that when that time comes. So those are the 2 trainings that are coming up, or the 2 sets of trainings that are coming up. And so I'll just say actually, on the slide it says manager supervisors training coming October, November. Actually, it will be spanning the entire time, starting in late October, all the way until the completion of these manager-employee conversations. So there's time for all managers to be trained who want to get that training. Oh, okay. So the next thing is about outreach. So how can I learn more about the TTC? So first of all, of course, we have another forum just like this, or another set of forums just like this in November. So coming up in November, and we'll show some tentative dates for those forums in a little bit. And also we have kind of our regular kind of email, newsletter kind of channels that if you're interested and want to find out more about the TTC, for sure, when you skim through your email, when you see those newsletters come up and you see TTC, do be sure to open that email and read those articles, because that's one major way we'll be sharing information about the TTC specifically to you. So inside UW, working at UW, and if you're manager or supervisor, the Manage newsletter will also contain information. So those are some of the channels we're using to communicate more information about the TTC. Another good place to check is the TTC website. So we have a whole website built with lots and lots of pages and lots of information about the project. And so any new and updated information will go to that website. So for example, Diane mentioned just earlier about the benefits summary. So all those things that she covered in that section just now about benefits, summaries of those findings will be on the TTC website. For this particular forum, we're recording it. If you haven't noticed the cameraman in the back, we'll also be posting the summary or the recording of this forum on the website. And also, I see some of you with your cameras taking pictures of the slides, which is great. But we will also have the slides of this forum on the website. So it's really a good place to go. If you're ever wondering where can I find more information, the TTC website is where kind of your first go-to place. And then there's also the TTC Professionals Outreach Network. I've been here for about 2 months now, finally got that down. So the Professionals Outreach Network is really meant for a way to get information about the TTC out to all the colleges, schools, and divisions. And so there should be one or two, at least, representatives from each of your divisions. So the 30+ divisions that we have on campus, there should be representatives from each of those divisions in this network. And so we meet on a bi-weekly basis, and we talk about what are some ways, what information are people looking for, what are some ways to get more information out, and things like that. So in addition to your HR professionals in your department or division as kind of people to ask questions about, and also to us, the TTC website, but also your folks in the Professionals Outreach Network. You can ask questions of them as well about the TTC. All right, so like I said, the November forums are coming up. We're also planning to hold forums kind of in the similar format to share more information as we get closer and closer to the rollout of TTC. So these are just some tentative dates. It's not completely set in stone, but just so you know. And like I said, the TTC website will be a really good place for you to find more information about the project. So as soon as we have more information, micro-learnings, handouts, slides, all these different things, we'll be using the TTC website as a place where we can put all those things and where you can access all of them. And I'm going to go ahead and do the wrap-up as well. So the project timeline, we saw this at the very beginning of our presentation, and I know it's a little hard to read, but the kind of thing I'll just especially point your attention to is that starting in December, that employee-manager conversation where you will sit down with your manager, supervisor, or someone in HR to talk through your new PD. That will happen starting in December and all the way through to about mid-February. That's when those conversations are happening. So as an employee, that's kind of the key date to be looking at. And again, this is a wrap up. So just some reminders of what to expect, what's coming timeline-wise. So the new titles and job structure will be available March 1st. That's kind of the timeline we're working towards. And then the updated policies and procedures to support the new job structure and all these different things is also slated to come out March 1st or to be completed by March 1st. And then also updated salary ranges, also that same timeline. So those are all the things we're kind of working towards with that March 1st date. And then just some reminders, again, something that you've seen earlier already. No immediate pay increases expected as a result of the project. So the keyword is no immediate pay increases, right? So we don't have a way to kind of automatically March 1st, your pay will not change on March 1st. So any increases in pay, just as a follow-up to that, will need to be funded and planned over time, right? So it's not something that's gonna happen March 1st, but it's gonna take some time for some of these things to shift. A long-term compensation strategy will be developed to address any pay inequities. So again, it's not something that we can kind of implement or change come March 1st. It needs some strategy around it, right? So this is why there's no immediate pay increases, and we need to plan for it. We need to come up with a strategy of how to address these things. Okay, so just again, information coming soon, and these are some of the topics we're hoping to cover in the November forums. So title, series, and levels. So as we build that job structure, we'll have more details to share of what that structure looks like, which includes things like title series, levels within a job title, and things like that. Career paths and opportunities, employee mapping to new titles and SJD. So all these things are coming. And also benefits enhancement recommendations. So now that we have all these results, we're putting together a summary of them and coming up with recommendations for what are important to employees, how can we remain kind of competitive and reward employees with great benefits in the future. So we purposely, as you can tell with time, we still have plenty of time left in the forum, and we purposely made a lot of time so that we can take questions. So we're doing questions in two different formats. So just a reminder, we're recording this particular presentation, which is why we're kind of doing questions in this way. So one is if you, so hopefully you all got an index card where you can write down your questions. So if you have an index card with a question, then maybe you can just hold it up, and then we'll come around and collect it. And Dawn over here will be kind of looking through them and grouping similar questions together. And if you would like to, while we're collecting those questions, if you can also come up with, there are 2 mics set up on each side of the room. If you can overcome the fear of standing in front of everybody and asking a question, you can come up to the mic and ask us questions, and we'll kind of take turns answering those questions. So either you can come up to the mic with a question, or you can pass around your index card with your questions written on it. Sure, thank you. So I know some people have other important things to do, and as you're leaving, if you don't mind just making sure, if you filled out a survey, a feedback survey, which is the half sheet that you got as you came in, if you can just hand those to one of the people at the door, we really appreciate that, so we can get your feedback about how helpful this forum was and things like that. So we have at least one person with a question, so if you want to go ahead, I think the mic should be prepped.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you could talk about the process that exists for employees to reconcile any differences or discrepancies between their position descriptions and the standard job descriptions as they're reviewing their unique position descriptions. Does that make sense?
So this discrepancy between the standard job description that is kind of forming the foundation of your PD, of your position description?
Yeah, let me try again. Sorry. So when an employee gets their position description to review this fall
Yes.
with their managers, what processes exist for employees who have differences of opinions in what's included?
Sure, yeah.
Take that.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? So there will be, the hope is that during that initial discussion, if there are any discrepancies, that we're able to resolve those in that informal setting between the manager and the employee with direct conversation. If it cannot be resolved there is a process that's outlined for an employee to formally appeal the standard job description that they've been tied to. Thank you. So, is there, oh.
Hi, a couple things. I saw your slide on your position description. One of the things that said up there was education. I know we've discussed and got agreed to that work-life equivalent, except for in cases like a nurse or CPA, so I would think that education shouldn't be something that's up there. There's people who have been lead workers for years, for instance, who could be a supervisor, and hopefully you will let people know that that won't cut them out of those jobs.
Thank you. That's a great point. So the education that is pointed at would be in instances where a job has a staunch requirement. Let's think an attorney would need a JD. That education should be listed in the standard job description. In most instances, though, we will list what's called a typical preferred minimum. I guess is the best way to describe that. It would not disqualify anyone from applying to a position. It wouldn't disqualify someone from carrying out their everyday duties that they have been doing, but just would help us to understand as we go to market on the standard job description that we're comparing apples to apples. But again, it would be a typical preferred minimum in most situations.
As long as work-life equivalent is the same as education.
Yes.
Also, you talked about in the position description special tasks, that 0 to 20% might be a special task. Now, as we went backwards on that, it said the pay would be the job market comparable. So if you have special tasks on yours, then you're not actually doing what's in that job market comparable. So you're doing something above that, and yet there'll be no compensation for it, because coming this way, you're going to be comparing that to market the same as going the other way. So where's the incentive to find out and do this extra work if we're not going to get compensated for it?
So there's sort of two-part answer to that, so if you'll give me just a second. So in some situations, there is the possibility that a unique responsibility would be added to someone's position description that truly does change the standard job description alignment. In those situations, we would look to have a standard job description be changed to reflect the work that's being performed. In other situations where it doesn't really necessarily change the innate function of the role, those employees that are carrying on additional unique responsibilities, it would come down more to how we administer pay within the salary structure, whether that's someone being further along in the salary grade that they're assigned because of those unique responsibilities. That may be one way that it's captured, but I guess two parts there. It's either would be handled via how you progress in that range, or you may have a new standard job description that you need to be tied to.
Okay, so in this position description too, this 20%, we've talked all along that people shouldn't be excluded from getting to these jobs because of people putting in there something specific to them so that no one else in that job description can get to that job. And that's not going to be the case there either, is it?
That will not be the case. So remember, the position description really belongs to you as the incumbent. The standard job description will list the typical responsibilities that we would expect anyone in the role to be able to carry out. Now, if we get to a position description and one of the unique responsibilities is tied to Brian Steen, when I left, if I was to leave that position, it doesn't mean that you would be disqualified. That unique responsibility would likely fall to someone else on my team, or it would be handled in a different way, but you would still be married to that initial standard job description that describes the innate function of the job. So it definitely would not disqualify you because someone has a unique responsibility in a particular position if they're tied to the same standard job description.
So under compensation,
Yep.
we have people right now at the top of the pay grade who are not getting raises or getting lump sums, which affects their health care when they retire, which affects their sick leave to their health accrual, so their health care isn't right. So people at the top, we also state that no one will lose any money, but if you are reclassified to a different level, they're saying you're not doing 3 work, you're doing 2 work, you will be at the top of your pay grade and will not get a raise again. So we may not lose anything, but you're not going to get any raises for quite some time. we're also, I know, hiring people at higher rates right now, or at least as high as people already in those jobs, which is causing compression, and yet you say there'll be no immediate raises coming up. Now, how are you going to take care of your current employees when you talk about retention, and yet you're hiring at or higher than the people are here right now?
Absolutely. So to that exact point, the reason that we're saying there will not be an immediate pay increase is because there really are a lot of considerations here. We have issues of compression. We have, in some cases, issues of inversion where people have actually bypassed more tenured or senior employees on campus. We have to get a real solid understanding, number one, of what that core salary structure is going to look like. Two, we need to have employees mapped to the correct standard job descriptions and position descriptions, so then we can see the impact. We can identify employees who may be outside of a range or below, or above a range maximum, below a range minimum, and then we start to develop strategies to say, here's how we deal with these things. It could be, as Shana mentioned, there may be a phased-in approach where we have to tackle part A and B in year one and part C in year two. What the message there is not that we plan to roll out a salary structure and identify that people are below the minimum or above a maximum and just sort of leave it there to coast on its own. The idea is we have to identify that population. Once that's identified, we can start talking about strategies to mitigate some of those issues. But it is complex. To your point, there's a lot of considerations that are taking place on campus.
So here's a strategy. Just have a base and don't have a ceiling. So if people get moved, they can still get a raise, or people at the top of their pay grade now, without a ceiling, they'd still get a raise. Because if we're getting merit pay, for instance, they're across with some 2% that's not from the state, they can't get that. But if there wasn't a ceiling, these people who have shown that they deserve that money will still be able to get it. And that's happening in a lot of places.
Yeah, so salary structures without a maximum, I would say, is definitely a rare instance when we talk about industry standards. I always use the example, I don't know if people follow basketball, but Steph Curry has a cap on how much money he can make, right? His cap is really, really large, but he does have a maximum that he would hit. The same here. But the idea is that we then collaborate and really start talking about strategies that take us beyond what currently exists and talk about ways that we deal with that. But there are real maximums, that exist in almost every institution, every industry. There are just salary maximums. It's just sort of what it is. So I can't say if that would be a strategy we take on, but
otherwise,
it would be rare.
Fairness, how do you tell people that we're hiring people in higher level and higher rate of pay than you are, but you train them to do your job? That's a real problem, and I haven't heard it addressed yet.
Yeah, so absolutely. So when you develop out these salary structures, the idea is that you not only develop a salary structure that fits what's happening in market, but you also develop really strong salary admin guidelines that lay out expectations. So when we think about hiring new employees in, you would expect new employees to fall within a certain place within that salary grade. And for our more tenured or senior employees that have excellent performance, that have contributed well to the university, we would expect them to be much further along in the range. In current state, I do understand that there have been recent hires that may have come in higher than someone else or very close to, which are the compression and inversion issues. But the goal of TTC is to really move us to a place where we have a robust compensation structure that's supported by strong salary admin guidelines that address that exact point.
I want to just interrupt for a second because we have about a dozen more questions.
They just pay a luxury tax. You can pay a luxury tax for me.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a few other questions. One of them here is, what is time loss? What does that mean regarding the BVA? Mercer calls paid time off. We refer to it as paid time off, vacation time, personal days, sick leave, as paid time off, and they refer to it as time loss. So that's what they were referring to. Will the timeline be posted online? Yes, absolutely. If it isn't now, we'll make sure it gets there. So the timeline will be posted online, as will this presentation, and that was the second question on here. So the presentation today will be posted by the end of the month on our website. When will standard job descriptions be posted? And that will be as of 12/1. So you will be able to go out there and take a look at all of the standard job descriptions as of 12/1 prior to your employee manager conversations. Will the vacation benefit for long-time exempt employees be impacted? So right now we have a leave structure that's different, university staff to academic staff, et cetera. So one of the things we are looking at is normalizing leave benefits so that UW has one leave package for everyone. Nobody will be negatively impacted by that. Might be positive impact, but we are looking at, and this would be longer term, so not immediate, looking at normalization of our leave structure. So that takes a lot of IT work behind the scenes to be able to do that. So that one's going to be a little bit further out there, but we're evaluating that. So more to come on that one.
Is it okay if I jump in here with a question?
Sure.
I'm curious how this whole process intends to address the divide between university and academic staff, and especially the challenges of moving from one to another.
I think a lot of the challenges of moving to one to another are based on the different leave packages. Because if you go from one to another, you might lose in your sick leave or your vacation time allotment. So a lot of reasons, a lot of the reason people don't do that movement is because of the leave structure. One of our primary goals is to look at normalizing to avoid that very situation. Okay. When the competitive analysis was compared, did you go further than the Midwest for collecting data? And yes, if you remember looking at those peer groups, we had a lot of them from the West Coast, we had a lot of them from the East Coast. When you take a look at, we had SUNY, we had UCLA, we had Stanford and Berkeley, and we had a whole bunch of them. So yes, it actually is a national comparative.
Dan, can we pause for one from the audience?
Is training going to be mandatory for managers?
Is training going to be mandatory for managers? We've talked about that. I don't know if it's going to be mandatory, but it'll be highly encouraged. Every employee will definitely have a need to speak with a manager, and we will be monitoring that. We plan to do a survey for every employee so that they can tell us how their job title, how their job tasks compare to what they're actually doing, compared to their jobs. So yes, we're hoping that everyone will have it. It's still in discussion whether that'll be mandatory. What are your thoughts?
Given that my most recent manager, I did not meet with one-on-one during the entire time that he was a manager with me, I do not anticipate the tenured faculty member who is becoming my manager to be going to any meetings, especially since he is also taking on the role of chair of the largest undergraduate major on campus. So going to manager meetings for this is not probably a high priority. And so part of what I'm wondering, is there any way for us who are going to be impacted by this severely to be proactive in finding out what's going on rather than the month where meetings start with managers?
Yeah.
Particularly, I'm interested in what's happening to instructional staff titles.
Okay, so if your manager, your official manager doesn't have the meeting with you, we have also allowed for HR. So if the manager wants to defer to HR, to have HR meet with you, every employee will have a meeting, whether it be with HR or their manager. So you will be able to do that. Instructional titles comes up here in a second, so I'm going to go ahead and...
Is that HR person someone like literally in my department, and how would I find out who that person is?
That's going to be up to the divisions, and they will have to communicate that with you. So we're letting the divisions decide with their departments who's doing the employee meetings with who.
What's a division? So like what division am I in?
School or college.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Have you incorporated UW's extensions TTC data, in particular public media? And yes, we have. We've been working on those SJDs for UW Extension and public media, so we have taken both into account and have the standard job descriptions for those. Is there a plan to regularly review the total compensation to the market? Yes, it hasn't been done since 1986, as all of you know. However, now we're doing it, and so the standard is typically every 2 to 3 years, so we will review it annually, and we'll actually do an entire market review every 2 to 3 years, if not sooner. So yes, we do have that in the works. When is the formal appeals process scheduled to go through shared governance because of the December meetings? TTC has a shared governance advisory group that we meet with on a monthly basis, and we're currently working on the appeals process, so we don't have it fully baked yet, but when we do, it will definitely go to our TTC governance advisory group prior to December.
Sean has something.
Is it okay if I hop in and ask a question?
Please do.
How is this project going to impact promotions and job title changes in the meantime until this change takes place? And is it expected that there's still going to be tiers such as associate, no prefix, and senior once this all takes place?
I'll take that question. All right, for the time being, before implementation, it's normal business. So it won't have any effect on that at all. In terms of future state of changes to certain prefixes, like you mentioned, associate, no prefix, senior, there will be some changes in that. And that's because we're trying to work with the whole idea of that market-informed titling structure, right? So we're looking to make our official titles, like the ones you'd see in the HRS system and someone looked you up, that to really reflect the market in terms of the titling. What we also are exploring, though, is that we know for some people, they might say, you know what, I understand that you're saying an associate accountant will now be an accountant one, but I don't really want to put that on a business card, right? I can't really go to a conference and say, hey, I'm an accountant one, and make sure that people really understand that. For those purposes, and we're going to have guidelines on that, we'll still have what we currently think of kind of like working titles, right? Or auxiliary titles, and we're calling them business titles. And we are actively working on guidelines around that and trying to really inform the schools, divisions, on how to implement and allow for those business titles to still exist.
So will this, I mean, this change is going to occur. What if you're right on kind of on the fringe of between changing titles? So let's say during this performance review, you're be checking in, let's say you defer until next year. Is there some sort of process to talk about this when the change is going to happen kind of mid-year between performance reviews, something like, let's say that's the trigger for a title change? You know, that's going to be a title change. Is there going to be any process for making sure that gets addressed at your next performance review since you just had a title change?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, so if you have a performance review, so I'm assuming let's just use kind of pseudo dates, so January, early January, right? And someone says, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Dan.
Dan, you're a fabulous performer, you're up for promotion, and you're thinking, and the manager should be thinking, well, we have implementation of TTC March 1st, 2020. I would expect, and that communication would go out for those instances as we march closer and closer towards implementation, that OHR would be speaking to divisional HR to be like, hey, when you have instances of that, touch base with us. It's just so we're making sure that we're doing right by the employee, right? Does the promotional title that you're thinking of in current state, will that still exist in March 1st, 2020? Yes? Okay, we're good, right? Or maybe there's a slight change in the wording. But if not, what can we do? And those type of situations will have to be addressed.
Yeah, it's just like a gray area between when there isn't guaranteed to be a pay increase.
Yeah.
However, you still should be getting that pay increase with that promotion. So there should be some sort of way to address that.
Yes, and we're thinking about that not only just in terms of promotions and pay, but also recruitment, right? When you have a recruitment posting up in December, will that still have a valid title? You know, because recruitments take time, like, would that still be valid in February and March? So that's what we call cutover planning, and in the timeline we have that as something that we're actively exploring right now with recruitment, performance management, obviously compensation and titling with Office of Human Resources to mitigate issues that might potentially pop up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Shana, I just wanted to interject. My name's Caitlin. I'm also a core project team member. I wasn't presenting today, but I was asked to address the instructional question that had arisen from the mic over here. So just a reminder that instructional titles for academic staff is most definitely in the TTC wheelhouse, and we have drafted standard job descriptions for instructional titles just like all other job groups. So the job group that will probably see the majority of those instructional titles fall into is the teaching and learning job group. Remember that faculty are out of scope for TTC, so they will not be impacted because of this project. But I know that a lot of people have talked about faculty associate or faculty assistant or lecturer. So we've used the same methodology to draft those standard job descriptions as all other job groups. The TTC project will be creating, and OHR will be creating that standard crosswalk to identify what a current title might look like in the future and what it will be named moving forward, which then division will approve of the incumbents that fall into those titles, and then an employee and a manager will have that conversation to confirm that that was the appropriate mapping for that employee. So, you know, through that mapping process, we might identify holes in which we have not captured the essence and the core responsibilities of a specific title, and we would need to address that at that time. So just know instructional titles are in, and we have utilized the same methodology throughout for all job groups. Okay. The question was, will it be done by December? They will be posted with all the other standard job descriptions in the library come 12/1, correct. So along with all the other titles, they will be posted at the same time.
So if there is a hole, you won't have to know to tell you about it in December?
If there is a hole, we would identify that with that employee mapping process that happens at the divisional level with OHR's help and partnership, as well as with a manager. A manager should be most definitely in a conversation about this prior to 12/1 because they need to be prepared on 12/1 for that conversation. If we identify holes after that, we most definitely need to rectify those. It is, as Diane had indicated, that it is most definitely highly encouraged for managers to participate, but divisional human resources most definitely will be in those conversations as well.
Could we pause and take one from the audience? Oh, you.
I have a question about the process of normalizing the leave packages between academic and faculty, academic and university staff. Would that result in the loss of leave for university staff?
Nobody would be negatively impacted. So we have to figure out a good way to merge these two. Sorry about that. Did I do it? We have to figure out a good way to merge these two without having negative impact for employees. So just trying to normalize so that the transfer and the movement between positions is easier, and we have one standard leave package for all.
So there's one on the card I just wanted to read before we lose more people. So it says, what should an employee do to prepare for the meeting with their manager? I will chime in and welcome anybody else that has additional thoughts. But I think attending forums like this are an important step in that preparation. Also visiting the TTC website, becoming familiar with the concept or the idea of task versus responsibility, position description versus standard job description, because you'll want to be equipped with all of that knowledge as you sit down to talk with your manager and they start to describe to you what your position description looks like. You'll want to have the ability to talk about the tasks that you carry out every day to accomplish those responsibilities, and I think those would be important steps, and I don't know if anybody else has additional thoughts on preparation.
So one thing I'd add is that we did, one of the things that Learning and Talent Development did in Human Resources was expand on a lot of the regularly offered workshops along the lines of communication, because one of the things we know is that communication with managers and supervisors is something that is an ongoing area that people are always trying to work on, and it goes both ways, both from managers communicating effectively with their staff, but also with your ability to communicate effectively with your supervisor. So one thing I would just reiterate, and one of the things we did was we did increase capacity and availability of 3 at least, and I think more than that, of our communication workshops that are regularly offered. They're free for UW employees. We'd highly encourage you to participate in any kind of learning and talent development. If you're looking for a reason to jump in and say, gosh, go to your supervisor and say, I'd like to attend some workshops, especially given that title and total comp is coming up, that might be a way to get their attention and say, this is something I want to do to improve my ability to communicate with you, particularly as those conversations come forward. So we have tried to think about what are the ongoing skills that people need to be effective in the workplace, knowing that one single conversation that you have with your manager or supervisor about Your new position description, we hope, if you haven't been having ongoing conversations, stimulates more connection and more opportunities for you to communicate and interact with your supervisor. So those are additional things that are out there. Tina, do you want to add anything? Oh, sorry, my name is Don Shute and I work in human resources.
So I'll just add quickly that if you're not familiar with the talent development course catalog, that's obviously a place to start to look for courses that would be applicable in this situation. But also on the TTC website, in one of the kind of tabs, there's a listing of those communication courses that Don just mentioned. So if you go to the TTC website, it has those courses listed that we feel like are most applicable in this situation for skill building, and it'll also even list like the times and dates of those classes.
So I think we're ready for another question right here.
Yeah, thank you very much for the information. The comp structure that you're doing with Mercer, the analysis, will that be completed prior to 12/1 and published with the standard job description so that you'll understand what the standard job descriptions are? And
Sure, of course. So one was the competitive assessment. That already occurred. And that was at a point in time assessment using data, I think, back in July 2017 to really look at, before we start this whole process, where are we really with the market? And by market, we looked at national data, all institutions, healthcare, higher ed, all of that, to see exactly where we were. So once we had a kind of a pulse on where we should be and where we are, we could basically like use that information to be like, okay, this is a good peer group. This is a good group of competitive and comparator organizations where we can use to benchmark our jobs versus how they pay. So that has been completed. And again, that's a point in time assessment. It's not really informative of what we're trying to do here with this new title, total compensation, job structure, and titling structure. So with that information, though, Mercer was able to create, again, the peer group, and then recommend a salary structure that we could utilize. So in terms of, and I'm just thinking of the timeline, we have that. We need to solidify titles, standard job descriptions, and as we mentioned before, actually, with that structure of these are the jobs, right, and here are the descriptions, marry that with current state. Right? So how do you take current jobs and current titles and basically match the equivalent in this future state or TTC implementation state? So that's what we're working on right now. And that's what we're going to then supply over to the schools and colleges to say, okay, did we get that mapping or that job matching correct for each of your employees? Until we can have that, we can't really apply the market data. And then we can actually analyze employees' pay versus that pay to really reflect what we're trying to do here in this title and total compensation project.
But you're trying to standardize the job descriptions, right, to the market. So those job descriptions should have a market equivalent, right? And so we're going to have these conversations in December with our employees about, yes, this is where you got slotted, and here's your standard salary range for that job. Is that information going to be available for managers at that time, December 12th, when these are available? Second question, followed on, is if an employee gets slotted by OHR in the wrong description, who gets the final say in terms of, is it OHR or is it department group level discretion in terms of where that employee fits?
Okay. So for the first question, I'm just going to summarize very briefly. Will salary ranges or salary at all be part of that conversation that kickstarts on 12/1, right? This is the manager-employee conversation of basically, is this your job? So in terms of how that conversation should go, salary should not be part of that conversation. It really should be, the crux of it is this your job? Does this, not just your standard job description, but the ability to add unique responsibility as well, does this really capture the essence of what you're doing? Right? That conversation really has to be a very purist conversation like that because we don't want salary to be a swing factor. And this is kind of a comp best practice, HR best practice of it really shouldn't be the concern. The real crux of that conversation should be, is this your job? Right?
So when the employee asks, what do we tell them?
When the employee asks,
what's my salary range for this position? What is our answer to that employee?
That the actual structure itself won't be implemented till 3/1, so that information will be available to all employees on March 1st. Okay. Yes. Okay.
And the second question?
Oh, second part, sorry, could you reiterate?
Yes.
I'm good with numbers, not with
So
words.
if OHR slots an employee in
Yes,
somewhere
thank you.
that's maybe not what the manager or the
Yes.
organization understands that employee to be capable of or doing,
Mm-hmm.
who has final say about that?
So even though that conversation should be a healthy conversation of do you agree, and the employee, if they don't agree, should be able to raise that issue of, no, I don't agree. There could be a back and forth there where the manager then goes to divisional HR or Office of Human Resources and says, you know what, my employees are really not, they're saying that this job really doesn't reflect what they do. They don't see themselves in this. Help me out. Should we be looking at this again? Is there a better job title, a better job match itself? If that ends up falling to a no, then we would have to make sure that the manager is equipped with the reasons why that job really is appropriate. In the end, the employee always has the ability to appeal. So right now, we're creating a TTC-specific appeals policy where employees can, after 3-1 with implementation, still appeal their title. And by title, I really mean how they were mapped, the job that was assigned to them. That will be available for all employees.
Thank you.
But with that whole review process, OHR does have final say. Yeah, thank you.
We have another question over here, it looks like.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm a center administrator, so I have sort of a unique perspective, but I was struck by the gentleman who was asking about his manager and having training, and he wasn't sure the difference between a department and a division. And I learned a lot of new things today, but I was wondering if you could explain the difference between a manager going over the position description with an employee and division HR going over the position description with an employee, sort of what that process is and why maybe one division would have division HR and who that is, and why one division might choose to have the managers go over the position descriptions with an employee instead. Because excuse me, I think there's some confusion about that.
Okay, thank you. We would highly encourage managers, direct managers, to sit down with their employees. However, we know it's not reality in all cases, so what we have chosen to do is allow divisions to make that choice. If they have managers who want to barter with the HR staff to go ahead and have these conversations, or in some cases, it may be that HR sits in with the managers if the managers don't feel comfortable having these conversations on their own. So we're leaving the flavor of the day to the division to decide. We just want to make a requirement that every employee has this conversation. Could be done in groups as well. Doesn't have to be one-on-one. So we may have a group of 5 people that all do the same thing and report to the same manager. Perhaps that manager wants to have a group session talking about SJD and then meet individually on the PD itself.
Okay, so each division, so say, you know, I'm an OVCRGE, they could decide that their HR divisional people will come and talk to each of the employees. But say CALS, for example, they might have the individual managers do it, or LNS will have the individual managers do it. It's really just their decision on how they do it.
It is their decision, and I don't think that it'll be all or none. I think a division might say 1 manager or 2 managers, or whoever it might be, but everybody else does their own, right? So I think it'll be kind of a hit and miss thing.
Great, thank you.
Yep, sure. Okay, does the compensation data from peer institutions suggest that UW employees are A, paid fairly, B, underpaid, or C, overpaid? So we're still looking at this data. There were so many peer institutions we evaluated. We're still looking at it. At this point in time, though, from a preliminary standpoint, are we paid fairly? Yeah, we're fairly competitive. Are we underpaid? Maybe in some cases. So it's really a job-by-job type of thing. Some jobs are under, some are over, and some are competitive. So it's hard to say across the board because it really is based on the job and the title.
Could we take one from this side?
Maybe you could help me. I'm seeing a couple of disconnects, and the first is in December we're meeting with managers to help develop the position description and then pass that along and then agree upon that. But it isn't until March that you find out what the pay range is for that. So you're really not sure what you're going to be agreeing to.
Well, you should
So
be
how do you
agreeing
coordinate
to,
those?
right, you should be agreeing to the tasks. The tasks represent primarily what you do. So if you remember the SJD, it's 4 to 8 typical responsibilities. Those are the high-level things. Those are not the everyday regular tasks. Those are the high-level things that should describe your job for about 80% of the time, right? And so when you're meeting with your manager, those are the things you're going to be agreeing to, keeping in mind that no one is having a pay decrease. So your pay will not be negatively impacted.
It may not be, may not be negatively impacted immediately, but you're not sure what it should be. Maybe it's going to be X, maybe it should be X plus 1. I mean, you're saying it will remain X, but you don't know what it should be or could be.
Well, the market data will be put in place in March. You will be able to see it. We'll have it posted at that point. So at that point, you'll be able, and possibly sooner. We do want the conversations, though, to be around the idea of, do the tasks and does the title represent what this job is?
The other disconnect is that it seems that the concept and the philosophy of this is to develop a template or a design of sorts that you can impose for campus and system. Yet each time somebody comes up with a question, it's, well, you can bring that up, you can negotiate that. So what I'm hearing is that you're developing a plan, but it's all barterable. You can negotiate independently.
Yeah, I'm not hearing that we have a lot of barterable ability for that. What we are saying, though, is that if you meet with your manager and do not agree with something, we certainly are open to listening to that and looking at it. So maybe that's the barterability. But we will have market rates established for each job title. That's not something that would be something we can change.
And one last question, if I could.
Non-appealable, yeah.
How much does campus or system anticipate saving by developing this smoother working program?
The question is how much does campus anticipate saving? We haven't even looked at that. That isn't the goal here at all. The goal is to really have marketable, equitable pay and benefits so that we match market and can recruit and retain valued employees. It really isn't about how much the cost savings would be. So we haven't even looked at that.
I was trying to imagine myself as the chancellor sitting in Bascom and having a group coming to me saying, we would like to develop this plan. We think it's going to be more equitable, whatever. One of my first questions was going to be, what's it going to cost us? What are we going to save? And before you would get authorization or to get signed off, I would think somebody on the Hill is going to say, yep, this is going to save us X number of dollars.
I think when we look at the long-term strategy, we're doing a long-term compensation and a long-term benefit strategy. That will include dollars, right? But right now, the goal of the project is really not about savings. It's to identify what fair and equitable market jobs should look like that we don't currently have. It's really the structure development, not necessarily that we're going to be upping anyone's or decreasing anyone's salary. That isn't the case. Did you say?
We do have about 5 minutes, just so you know, we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure that if you, when you leave, if you're wondering what happened to all the questions you wrote on cards that came back, we are going to collect, we have collected all the cards. We put out FAQs on the OHR TTC website, so if you want to see, we will answer all the questions that came up. The other item is that there are sheets to sign out to evaluate. If you'd be happy to, we'd be happy if you'd fill those out, please. But we have time for just about 1 or 2, maybe more questions.
I just wanted to, hello. I just wanted to quickly clarify as we talk about the employee manager discussions in December, that there's actually a process that takes place prior to that sit-down discussion. So OHR will take the initial crack at mapping jobs from current state to future state. But that will then go to divisional HR and then to employee managers. And before we ever sit down with an employee, managers and divisions will have the opportunity to say, this mapping isn't correct, or you've missed this particular job. I can't find one that fits this employee. That would all take place over these summer months leading up to the winter. And then in the winter, that's the employee's first opportunity to sit with the manager and see what has been developed. I just wanted to clarify that so that you didn't walk away with the impression that OHR is going to say, here is your standard job description, and there's not a dialogue or collaborative process taking place. And then when we think about the appeals process, the employee's appeal opportunity is directly fixed towards the standard job description and position description. So the hope is that, or not the hope, the intent is that these discussions will take place blind of salary so that we're not influencing which jobs are selected. As you can imagine, if I have two choices and one exists at grade 27 and one at 26, I might make a strong case that I'm at grade 27. But if I'm blind to that, we can really fix our effort towards what is the job that you carry out for the institution? Have we described it correctly? Did we capture what you do in the essence of your everyday role? And then we can get to the part about the compensation structure.
Caitlin? Sorry. That's right.
Hello, I have one question. It's here. It says, if you are currently in an academic staff title and are retitled into a university staff position, are there any negative consequences in terms of leave, benefits, retirement, etc.? The answer is no. Our intention is not to negatively impact benefits of an employee if they change employment classifications. We will still have university staff and academic staff titles, and those employee classifications will still exist. But if you do switch, and it's determined through TTC based on the Fair Labor Standards Act, and if you're paid in an exempt status or non-exempt status, your benefits will not be impacted because of that switch. Okay?
Let me ask first, anybody else that's here would like to ask a question that's not on a card? Otherwise, we'll just wrap up with a couple more on the cards, and then we're done.
All right, one card asks, you noted a compensation strategy was drafted and blessed by campus leadership. Oops. Sorry. You noted a compensation strategy was drafted and blessed by campus leadership. Can you see more or share on the TTC website? So this refers to the compensation philosophy that I talked back in the beginning of the presentation. So yes, we will be posting that in the coming weeks, so look out for that. It will be on the go.wis.edu/TTC project website, so it'll be there. Highlights, just in general, what a compensation philosophy does is really talk about and express how an organization is trying to aim their compensation and benefits programs. Like, what do they value? What are they trying to achieve? All that should be forward-facing, so any employee, whether they're a manager, supervisor, senior, junior, whoever, can all go and see and understand what an organization is trying to achieve, okay? So look out for that shortly. How often will ranges be adjusted based on market? So you heard before, this is the first time we're really comprehensively looking at the whole structure in all ranges over 30 years. But the intent and market best practice is about every 2 to 3 years. That's not set in stone, but we're looking to aim for that. This question says, we took part in the TTC review project, I think. Only about 10% of our media employees were represented in an SJD. How will this inadequacy be addressed? So I think what this employee is trying to say is, at a certain point in time when they looked at titles and SJDs, because they were released back in the winter for feedback to certain subject matter experts, this person is saying they only saw 10% of what they thought or were expecting to see. So based on that whole review process, which has been wrapped up, this might already have been addressed. We did create extra titles and SJDs through that whole feedback review process and culling through all the comments and suggestions, as well as in the process of going into and looking at all the current jobs that we have and trying to marry them to the future state. We might find holes there, and we'll address them there as well, and that's happening currently in the summer. So by the end of summer, we hopefully will have all of those addressed.
Maybe one last question. We're coming. Depending on which clock you look at, we're either overtime or just barely under time. So we'll shoot for the middle.
All right, last question. For new hires, when does the PD get developed? Before posting or after the hire is made? So for new hires, when they're actually applying, well, when you're trying to apply for a job, what you often see is a position description there, right? We're working with recruitment so that they understand what's the title, what's the standard job description, how can you add more and create a position description and post that and not deviate so much from the integrity of the actual original title and standard job description. So in case of this question, you would basically be hired into that PD or position vacancy listing, PVL. So that would be at the time of hire, but you would see it as you're trying to apply for the job. So is there a difference for new hires versus filling vacant positions? No.
So with that, we'd like to say thank you for persisting, hanging through all the questions. We intentionally left a lot of time. If you'd fill out that sheet, that helps us kind of think about the next one, and hopefully we'll see you in November. Thank you again for participating.